South Africans aged between 15 to 24 years and 25 to 34 years recorded the highest unemployment rates at 60.7% and 39.8% respectively. This is according to the latest unemployment rates published by Statistics South Africa. This has once again raised concerns on how this is exacerbated by the skills gap crisis as companies move away from manual labor and artificial intelligence and machinery, threatening to replace workers where non-skilled or semi-skilled positions needed to be filled. In an article written earlier this week, economist Dr Thabi Leoka took a deeper look at the factors contributing to more than a shortage of jobs, but also the lack of skills needed for future leaders to also compete globally. To discuss this further, we are joined virtually by Dr Leoka, but in studio with us, we've got Mapule Ncanywa, who is the chairperson of the Skills Development Working Group in the SA BRICS Business Council. Ladies, good to have you. Thank you very, very much for coming into studio. It's good to have you here with us. And of course, virtually, Dr Leoka, always a pleasure to be chatting to you. So let me begin with Dr. Leoka while we've got you there as well. Let's sort of start. I mean, you really did pen a wonderful article just outlining exactly what the problems are associated with the unemployment and skills shortage here in South Africa for the youth in particular. Perhaps for those that haven't read it, you want to give us just a little bit of a synopsis.
Yeah, so the article was prompted by the latest unemployment numbers, especially when you look at youth unemployment, where people between the ages of 15 and 24, if you look at the expanded definition of unemployment, over 60% of that age group is unemployed. And then just even broadly, the unemployment rate is even though it showed a little bit of a decline, is still quite high, remains quite high. And then when you look at provincial unemployment, which is even more scary for me, is that you have provinces such as the Northwest, where, again, if you look at the expanded definition of unemployment, 53.5% of people in working population in the Northwest is unemployed. So that means more people in the Northwest are unemployed than employed. You have similar trend in the Eastern Cape, where it's just around 49%, which is almost half of the working population is unemployed. And then when you look at trends when you talk to companies and you talk to businesses, they are looking for jobs. They are looking for young people to work. And young people that don't necessarily have to have this high skills. Call centers have high turnover. Young people leave call center employment. And then if you look at the Northwest, which is predominantly a mining province, miners are also looking for jobs, and they pay very well, especially for junior miners, newly employed, lower level employment. And they're not able to attract some rock drill miners, for instance. And you look at other industries as well in manufacturing, where you handle heavy metals and heavy machinery, for instance, and they are also struggling. So there is interesting dynamics. I feel that it seems as if the young are not interested in certain jobs that the older generation used to occupy. And there are reasons for that too, in that there are also young people that are moving to the urban areas like Johannesburg and Cape Town and Durban in the hope of finding a better job, but they're compromising, or they're willing to sacrifice a better lifestyle in, let's say, rural South Africa, and to move in, Johannesburg, and end up living in squalor in the hope of getting a job in the cities.
Yeah, I mean, these are reasons that certainly are worrying and certainly are growing, because these are the big issues. But if we look at something like, let's talk about BRICS for a moment, because obviously we had the massive BRICS summit that took place, and the interest from a lot of other countries wanting to join and invitations being sent out. You're looking at countries, obviously, that I suppose one would look to and say, well, where can we learn? How can we share skills? How can we develop, and where do the youth benefit from this? So perhaps, Mapule, we can talk about that. How do we work with a platform like BRICS to try and help the youth and the unemployment rate?
Yeah, no, thanks very much, Leanne. I think very relevant question, and one of the mandates that we have at the Skills Development Working Group is to look at transforming education and skills for the future. So a bigger part of what we're doing is to focus on emerging and transformational skills for the future for our youth here in South Africa, to allow them to take advantage of the opportunities that are presented by the BRICS formation. And we do that through a lot of interventions. One of those creating, a space called BRICS Academies, where we do a call out on our young people, those that have qualified in whatever degrees, those that have skilled themselves up to whatever level, to come in and upskill themselves, because there's a standardization committee that's set up, and that committee has set up a BRICS standard to check across the countries, and then we're only talking 5 countries. So we wanted to check the gaps that exist amongst the 5 countries from a skilling point of view, and come up with a standard to train and challenge our young people from the 5 countries. And obviously we then focus on the outcomes of those gaps to prepare them then for the future. We do have...
what are the gaps? Let's perhaps go there.
Right.
What are we looking at?
Look, I'll speak for South Africa for starters. Yes. In South Africa, a lot of digital skills, we are not yet there to take advantage of those. And we're talking, engineering, technological skills in the manufacturing space. We're talking construction technological skills, the creative skills in the digital space, as it were, and a lot of your cyber security skills that have been called upon. We are more on the entry and second kind of levels, where we would like to be right at the edge, competitive edge with the rest of the countries.
Yeah.
So the academies at the BRICS working groups that are created is to actually increase that pipeline of these future skills that are required.
And that's I mean, these are important aspects, but what really gets to me, and Dr. Leoka, perhaps you want to come in here as well, is that this hasn't happened as an overnight surprise, that technology, that these industries that you've mentioned have come in and taken over. It was not a surprise. It didn't just come and say, oh, what, look at this. AI is suddenly taking our jobs. These things are happening. Why have we not adequately prepared for that? Because surely our education system should have adapted itself decades ago to assist the youth and fill those skills gaps. I mean, this is not something, as I mentioned, that's come knocking on our door suddenly. We've been building up to this for so long. I mean, we even printed T-shirts. I saw government ministers, for IR and this and that and the next, and yet we have an unemployed skill that we just cannot fill these jobs.
Absolutely. I think that you're totally right, Leah, and we have been talking about this for a very long time. We didn't have to even wait for a BRICS for us to then realize the need for this. The summit, this was the 15th summit, for instance. You have to ask yourself what happened between Summit 1 and Summit 14, and what were the deliberations there. And that targeted youth unemployment, amongst other things. So as much as I appreciate the work that is done now and the linkages with other countries that have far surpassed us when it comes to technology, youth unemployment, empowering the youth, upskilling the youth, identifying the sectors of the future, these are things that we have also identified many years ago. These are things that we've also talked about from an education perspective, where we argued as economists and many people in South Africa saying we need to change our curriculum to make it future fit. Companies have also been saying that, look, they are transitioning, they're moving in a different direction, and they need the skills to support that move into that direction. And nothing has really happened from an education training perspective. We again just have post-school education as just TVET and university, and we need a multiplicity of education levels and systems. We could even bring back technicons, training colleges, etc., that will help people who don't necessarily want to go to a university, but they are skilled and they can fix things and work with their hands. We still haven't introduced any of that and promoted it, and also promoted entrepreneurship and meaningfully, not just on paper, black and white.
Yeah.
The other thing that I just want to emphasize here is that I'm very much more of a, I don't want to say an Africanist, but more, I believe in the Africa story, and that we have a lot to learn on the continent, but our growth as a country relies on the success of the continent. And we need to also channel examples from the continent. Kenya is very good with technology, and venture capital companies have looked at Kenya and Nigeria, and we've been left behind. So we as we're looking out into BRICS, we shouldn't forget the continent and how we can leverage from the continent, both from a learning perspective, but also this is an open market that is up for the taking, and we've watched other people dominate it, and we've been sleeping.
Yeah, indeed, and that's something that in a way we should be bowing our heads in shame for how we have let the youth down in this regard, because these are things that we need to. I mean, when you look around, and I mean, I've just come from a trip from overseas, and I mean, when we talk about automation, if you go to a grocery store, there are no tellers anymore. I mean, you check yourself out. So those are tens of thousands of jobs that can be taken away in this country. Everything is automated. Petrol stations, mines, you name it, it's automated. But you need people to have the skills in order to develop the technology. And that's where we have this massive gap. So, it's one thing, as Thabi was saying, to have this on paper. How is this getting to the youth? How are they actually benefiting from the things that you are speaking about at BRICS and the respective academies that you may have and partnerships with BRICS countries?
Yeah. I think for us, the important thing is that because BRICS is all about, trade and trade opportunities, and how we bring our young people is to ensure that these opportunities that we are aware of, we leverage off from the countries that have been ahead of us at South Africa. So we're not starting from the beginning to start this, for the BRICS Business Council in its 10th year now. We're not looking at starting from zero. So we borrow from Eurasia, looking at how they produce a lot of engineers. What is it that you did right? And come back to South Africa to check what is it that has been missing. And one of the things was to come up with what we call an atlas of skills. And we share that with sectors within industries. So we partnered with the CETAs to say, yes, we realize that the work that you do is meant to empower, young people, to ensure that sector companies are sustainable. But when we look at the atlas of skills, it actually tells them what are some of the emerging skills that we are seeing, tells them what are the skills that are changing and those that are, done away with. And we also, within the atlas itself, provided opportunities for them to implement now on the ground, do the call out to companies to call for young people, do programs that they run within their own companies, upskill these young people, reskill and cross-skill them. And that's very critical, because if we don't do that, after all, we will be saying, but why are we not yet there?
Is it running? I mean, for instance, if there's somebody that's watching now, are they able to apply? Can we get involved right now as we sit and speak?
So in June, we actually handed over an atlas of skill to the Food and Beverage CETA.
Okay. It's
on their website, because as BRICS, our mandate is to work hand in glove with the existing government entities that exist. So they can apply directly to the CETAs.
That CETA.
Correct.
And then the rest?
The other CETAs, because it takes time. You have to understand, as I said, what's in place and what are those gaps. They are following. So I'm very much clear that BRICS Forum come and gone, but we are continuing. All the 21 CETAs, we're partnering to ensure that they also have that. Okay. But secondly, I mean, and Leanne, young people watching us online at BRICS Future Skills, they can go up there and actually join our online training webinars, which we conduct for free, because that also capacitates our young people to benchmark themselves where they are at. And in next month, in a few weeks, when we run the Future Skills Challenge, we've organized a lot of companies, both local and BRICS-related companies, to come and interview our young people for potential jobs in those skills.
All right. Dr. Leoka, literally 1 minute and then we're wrapping the interview. We've got to get into news. But there is a huge danger if this is not addressed and with urgency. Perhaps you want to speak on that for a moment.
Yeah, Leanne, if 60% of people between the ages of 15 and 24 are unemployed, imagine where they will be in 10 years' time. So that 24-year-old will be 34 years old and unemployed, not in employment, education, and training. What future are we building? How are we going to be competitive when the people, the young people who are supposed to help us become competitive are currently not in employment, education, and training? So it does really paint a bleak picture. And every quarter when Stats SA releases labor numbers, they become numbers, we talk about it, and there's a little bit of a, shock, horror, and we forget about it without actually looking deeply and thinking about what needs to be done and actually implementing what needs to be done, and treating those numbers with expediency and the solutions to the problem with expediency.
Yeah, solutions most important. Ladies, thank you. Thanks for talking to us, Dr. Thabi Leoka and Mapule Ncanywa, talking to us about how young people are not only faced by unemployment, but the lack of skills is hampering their development and access to the job market.